Alright guys, today I thought I would do a little short video on processing some deer meat. Um, I've already skinned the deer, it's in the cooler. Actually I've had a couple of deer in this cooler. So what I'm going to do is show you a little bit about the way I process this. I've always processed my own deer. I have a meat grinder over here, but I'm not going to fool with any of that. I'm just basically going to take a hindquarter. Tenderloin is easy enough. We cut the sinew off the back and cut it up in steaks and fry it. And I've got one. I may do it on the video. I don't want to make a real long video. I'm going to get a hindquarter out, and I'm going to just show you a little about how I process this. This one is a little different than what I normally have. And I'm going to turn this camera down where you can see what I'm doing, and this one needs a lot of cleaning up because this deer here actually was cleaned in the woods. I literally cut this deer up into quarters and packed it out of the woods. So it was way back in the woods where I shot it, and we didn't want to fool with the whole deer, and these dogs is eating some of the scraps. But I'm going to turn this down and show you a little what I do. But what I was going to say is I normally cut all the meat off the bone on a hindquarter while that deer's hanging. And I don't have anything but the meat. This one still has the one bone in it. And I shot this deer running, wide open. And it was the first deer that I killed this year. And I splintered both back legs, broke it down. I shot it way too far back, but it dropped the deer. And so I have a busted up splintered bone down here on this one end. I normally don't have that to deal with. We're going to cut around that, and we're going to cut some of this nasty stuff looking off because it got leaves on it. We're just going to trim it's on the outside, and I'm going to show you a little how I do this. And you see what I do normally is I go ahead and start cutting, and I've got me a little buddy heater over here because it's cold today. My hands is about to freeze. You just want to clean up and get a lot of this stuff off. Normally, I've already cut when I'm doing a deer, and I may go ahead and do this now on the table and get it to the place that I would normally have this. And y'all, I like to do my cutting up with a fillet knife. This is a Kershaw fillet knife. It's adjustable. I can make it short. I can make it long. I really like this. Stays in my tackle bag normally. I really like this fillet knife. Now, when I'm filleting my fish and stuff, I normally use my electric knives. But I made a real mess out of this deer when I skinned him in the woods. So the dogs are enjoying eating bits and pieces of this outside, but what I normally do is I start at this bone, and I go right down the side of this bone, and you can see part of this deer is shot on the inside. I didn't realize that I had a piece, but what you do basically when you're cutting up this hindquarter and processing it, divide these muscles up into just separate muscle groups. Don't be cutting towards your fingers. Try to always turn that meat, cut away from your fingers. Day like today, it's the day after Christmas. It was like 20-something degrees this morning. It is still cold. I didn't want to go get in the canoe and paddle around in this cold water because if something happens, you wind up in cold water. It don't take long for a fun situation to turn deadly. And a lot of this, I wind up, here dog, they like that. We're going to clean all this nasty off of it. I know y'all seeing these leaves and things and thinking, oh my Lord. Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing myself. Cut these muscles into separate muscle groups. But what I do is I wind up with 2 or 3 different things. I wind up with a little bit of meat that I'm going to fry. I wind up with muscles that I'm going to cut up into steaks. And I'm talking about like I grill the steaks. And then I usually make like stew meat, soup meat out of part of it. So once you divide these muscles up like this, and you'll see I'm not really a stickler on exactly a certain process, and I'm not telling you that the way I cut up my meat and all is better than somebody else's way. I'm just showing you simply how I go about doing it. And see, I take that fillet knife and I can cut right down any of this damaged meat right here. It hurts my feelings to waste any of this meat, but you better off to get any of that mess right there and get rid of it now and just be done with it. It's easier. Now this is about the most racist thing that you'll ever hear me say on my channel. But when you're cutting up this deer meat, a good rule of thumb is anything on here that's white is no good. If it's white, it's got to go. You want to wind up with a red meat out of all of this. So you see how I'm pulling this skin right here? And I don't go in anything in no certain order. I'm not no speed demon on when I'm processing meat or skinning a deer. I'm not trying to race nobody. I'm trying to see what kind of quality of stuff I can come up with and not waste no more than I have to. Now I take, see like that, there's a good piece of meat in there. What I do is this is what a lot of people would consider a scrap, but see there's a good piece of meat in there. I cut that up into a small piece and I push it to one pile. That'll wind up as stew meat. This big muscle right here, I'm going to clean these thin, you see these layers of meat on it. Get that off. And that one there is a little shot up. Apparently when that bullet exploded, a shard of that bone went up through there. I may cut some of that loose. But like this. And I'm from one thing to the next till I get this. Like I said, I don't have no certain order I go in. But I clean everything up like that muscle. I lay it to the side. This, it's a lot of white, that white silvery looking stuff will make it so tough that you can't eat it. So just fillet that off basically. And that's why I like the fillet knife. And all this tallow, that silver skin looking, it's basically sinews what it is. And this, you can't hardly eat it. If you scrapping and you in a real homesteading situation, survival, and you need every scrap of meat to make it, it can be eaten. You're just gonna chew on it a while. You can see there's a lot of it on here. This is where the fillet knife comes in. I can slide that right in there and see I can skin. And if I hold it right, a lot of times that knife will just peel that off. But divide all these muscles up. You don't want to cut it up into certain, with 2 or 3 muscles together on something. And like right there, you can see that silver in under that. Hold that up. Sometimes you can lay it down on here and fillet it like you would a fish. In other words, you can take it and stick that under there and cut it like that. That works good too. I'll cut that up into pieces. I'm dividing up some of this stuff. See, like on this, there's a big thick piece of that white on there. Just take your time. This is time consuming, but cut all of that white mess away. Like I said, that's about the most racist thing you'll hear me say, but if it's white on meat, it ain't no good. I'm throwing that to the dog. But I've got everything off of this one. This has got a little bit of silver, but it's real light colored. It's more red. I leave that on there. Now what I'll do is I'll cut that up into steaks. But right now I'm trying to clean everything up. So like on this, what I do is I cut all the way down it right here. Then I can slide my knife right down under that. I'll have to go back down part of it, but you see I cut all of that off. No good. Now you've got a beautiful piece of meat right here. And I do this because I'm too stingy to spend $100 on deer processing And then when I get it back, I don't know whose deer I got. You know, when I shoot a deer, especially if I'm meat hunting, I'm looking for a younger deer. I'm not trying to shoot the oldest, biggest buck down there. Now, I like to buck hunt as much as anybody else. I'm not against killing a big buck, by no means. But when I am meat hunting, and see like this right here, I'm gonna square this piece off. And them scraps that I'm cutting off is what I'll initially cut up into stew meat and different things. So you just kind of cut them into pieces. And this right here, say there's a lot of fat right there. You just want to be careful around your fingers, cut that off. Now, this, I'll freeze once I cut this silver off of this side. I'll freeze as a whole loin. And what I'll do is I'll put it in a crock pot and make roast. Normally what I do is put it in a Dutch oven, but crock pot is pretty similar. I like to use a cast iron Dutch oven, and I'll put potatoes and different things around this and have a roast pretty much. And I know it looks like I'm probably wasting a little bit of meat, and I am probably a little more because I'm trying to hurry and not make my video too long. I know y'all don't want to watch a long, drawn-out video. And for the next little while, you're going to see that my videos has not got my logo at the beginning and my little logo watermark at the bottom. I'm having difficulties with my computer. The charger part, but see this right here, and I'll wash this a little bit, try to get some of that bloodshot off of it. It's not really going to hurt anything, but that won't be as perfect as some will. It's been soaking about a week. It should have had most of that out, but I'm going to freeze that just like this. And that'll be one of my roast. This, I'm going to cut this white part right off the edge of that. More than likely, I'm going to freeze it. Sometimes when I get down to finish up a bag, and I've got a vacuum sealer over here that I use, but I do my roast over here, this here, and this ain't as solid as I like to when I cut this. And I may peel this thin piece right here off. But this I usually cut up into steaks. Now it's not as good a steak is this piece right here will be. There's a loin in there that you can cut into steaks that it's a little more tender. But what I'm wanting to do is have some steaks, and I'm going to take some of this stuff when I go canoeing and camping and cook them over the fire in different ways. Now they will not be tender like a beef steak, but I'm not as picky about how tender my meat is. I got good teeth. I don't worry about that. Some people, if it ain't just falling apart in their mouth, they're not going to eat it. I'm not that way. There's nothing wrong with wanting tender meat. If that's your priority, by all means, eat what you want. Cut that white part off. It ain't too bad. All right. But I just cut this in, I'm somewhere between a 1/2 inch, 3/4. I'm guesstimating, I just look at it. But I'm making steaks out of that. And this don't take real long to do this. You can process, now if you just don't want to fool with a deer, take it to the processor. By all means, get it done right. You don't want to fool with it. They'll do you a good job. More than likely, most of them, you will get your deer back. I'm not knocking any processors. I know some of them, they're good folks. Really good folks. But I like doing my stuff myself. Now I done got down to the thinner parts. That scrap stuff, cut it away, throw it to the dog. They got to eat too. It's Christmas, give them a good meal. But now them little pieces, I'll cut that up, make stew meat. Now, one thing I didn't mention, you want to look at how that grain's running. When you see that, I can tell right here that grain is running this way. You want to cut across that grain if you're going to cut it into small pieces to fry, because it makes it a lot tenderer. If you cut it with the grain, you're going to have a long, stringy, chewy piece of meat. And if you're making stew meat out of it, you'll have big old long strings of stuff in your stew. So, and see, like them little pieces of silver, I go ahead and try to trim that off. That way I'm not, when I'm eating it, I don't want that in it. When I say I don't mind my meat being a little tough, I don't mean I want that in there. That's way more than just a little tough. But you can see these scraps of meat here. I just cut this stuff up in various, I try to cut it across the grain. Some of these little pieces, they really ain't no cutting it across the grain till you get to a bigger piece of meat here that you can see. And that's my soup meat pile. Stepping on a piece here. Go ahead and cut all this bloodshot off. Roscoe, he's waiting on another piece of it. Now we down to this piece. It's got that little line. That's going to be real tough. If you've got a meat grinder and you're going to grind any, I advise grinding all this kind of stuff right here like that up. In fact, I don't know if I'm going to cut that up or not. It'll depend on what I wind up with here at the end. Because you can see right here, there's a lot of silver on the back of that. And on the top. So you've got to get your knife in there. And the time I get that all peeled off, I'm probably not going to be left with a whole lot. So you're just about as well off to throw it away to begin with. But just for the sake of showing you it can be saved, you see how I went under there and still missed it? I'd rather do this on the top where I can see what I'm doing. Because I promise you, if you try to cook that with that layer right there on it, it's going to be hard to eat. But, you see, in just a minute, you clean that up, and you get a couple of bites out of it. Really not worth it, some of it. That needs to be, I'm probably going to throw that away. That ain't nothing but gristle. But you can see this has got a big, large piece of meat. Split it with the grain. And once you get all the silver off, you can cut these little pieces up. They could be fried. I mean, they're not as tender as tenderloin. But this is one whole tenderloin that we do, and we pretty quick, we've about got it knocked out here. We're going to do this in a roast. And actually, I'm going to cut this up into steaks. That's nasty silver. Got that cut off. Okay, now this has got a divider. That's two separate muscles. I try to divide it with the, you see how when you pull it apart, now that's good. Cut that up with stew meat here. I'm going to split it with the grain. That is a pretty piece of meat in there now. You can see how tight that grain is. That means that's a good piece of meat. But this don't take long, guys. You can process your own deer. Save that money. I'm too stingy to spend it. That's a little more bloodshot, but if I put it in a stew, it won't matter. Okay, now this is a pretty good piece of meat. Let's see if I can get some of this leaves and whatnot right off of here. We don't want that in our food. It ain't gonna hurt nothing, but it don't hurt. It don't look good for presentation. When you cook your mama a steak, and it's got that leaf stuck on there, she's not gonna be proud of you. So go ahead and get rid of all that if you can. See, my heaters done went out while I was talking. Okay. I'm going to square that off, and that's a pretty, but see, I'm going to cut me some steaks. I'm going to cut them about a 1/2 inch thick. We'll take these camping, package them with that vacuum sealer in a small package. Eat them right down there on the riverbank somewhere one night where I'll eat them. But you never know, I might get hungry at the house one night and decide, hey, I'm fixing to cook them on the Blackstone or light the grill. You can do any of that with this meat. All right, it's a little bit more bloodshot than I like, but I've got some roast. I've got some steaks right here to grill, fry, and them's two different mussels. And then what I've got here is some stew meat. I'm probably going to discard that. But some of this you see is when you start cutting this up, cut it up in a little less than a ½ inch, between a quarter and a half, I don't know, 3/8 or something thick. You can fry that if you want to, or you can make stew meat out of it, depending on what you do more of. But it is good meat. Whoa, you see that? Catapulted it, I did. But I did want to do a quick video, and I'll cut the rest of this up in just a second. I want to do the tenderloin right quick, show y'all. I've got sweet loins in here. That's those inside tenderloins. Okay. This is a tenderloin. Back strap, whatever you want. It's technically a back strap. We call them tenderloins. That inside loin, I call it a breakfast loin or a sweet loin. It's technically the tenderloin, if y'all like to be technical. But now I've always called this a tenderloin, so there's that. We'll argue about it later. But you got to get this silver white part. It's got to go. Don't want that. And I got this. Usually on the inside, there's not any. But the way I cut this one out, I actually got some of it. A lot of times when I get it out, the way I cut it out, I won't have any of it on the inside. Needless to say is, and I save it too now, y'all. Y'all gonna laugh at me whenever I start trying to hang it up and dry it out. But I'm gonna back my bows with it. I haven't backed one yet with my sinew. I have used it to tie arrows with. And this is traditional archery. This is making self bows. And if you're not into that, none of this is going to matter to you at all. Discard it, throw it away. But I want to save it, so. Now, I angle that knife up just a little bit till I get started. Now, my hands is cold, and I'm a little fidgety and somewhat a little bit nervous about my hands being cold doing this. Because you'll be cut one of them. Your motor skills ain't quite as good when it ain't much above freezing right now. It ain't quite. It's about 11 o'clock. And it's still pretty chilly for Mississippi folks. I know you guys up north in Canada's laughing at us about being so cold, but us southern folks don't handle this cold real well. I actually handled it fairly decent compared to most folks around here. I'd rather it be cold than I had hot. But I got enough sense to know that my fingers don't work as well in cold weather. Now you can take your knife and you can work this, but here's what I'm going to show you. Once you get this started, you got to be careful. I don't want to waste no meat, so right here it started pulling off. But you can peel that off. And if you don't mind wasting a little bit of meat, you can just rip the whole thing down. Especially with it cold, like this. You can see that. I'm not losing enough meat for it to really hurt nothing. Now once you start getting on down here, you may lose a little more. But see that? We just basically peel that whole thing off. Now being that I'm saving this, I'm going to clean it up a little bit right now, because it's easier to clean it up now than it is after it dries. Basically scrape that off, I think. I'm going to back my hickory bow with this. I had some hanging on that gambrel right over there, and I done took them back to my shed. But anyway, I'll clean that up off camera, but that's a nice piece of sinew. To these bow makers, it's valuable. You might want to contact them if you kill a bunch of deer and say, hey, you want my sinew? They'd love to have it. You know somebody that makes bows. And no, I don't want everybody else's sinew. I might take a little if somebody had some, but I don't need a whole lot. I don't make enough bows. I'm talking about if you know somebody that makes them and sells them. All right, I'm gonna hang this up over here to dry. Keep it up here where the dog don't get it. All right, back strap, tenderloin, whatever you want to call it. Here's how I do it. I just slice it up. I try to keep them straight. I don't cut them too thick. I don't try to cut them too thin. Sometimes they get that way, but I don't like a big, thick piece of meat. Now I do have a tenderizer that you crank and it runs through and pokes them holes. You can cut it a little thicker if you're gonna run it through it, but I hate to run tenderloin through that. I'll do them steaks like that if I decide I'm gonna cut them thinner and fry them. But this tenderloin is supposedly already tender enough, and you see how dark and pretty that piece of meat is. Now you can cut this in a section, put it on the grill, wrap it in bacon. It's fine that way. Most of the time, we normally just fry it. It's delicious that way. And this is a pretty good tenderloin. This is out of that 3-point buck that we called off the side of the bank. He was an older deer. Probably not quite as good a meat. We let several young bucks go. We missed a good buck. Should have killed some more deer. We're going to go back. This week I'm going to have time to go back and play in the woods a little. So. But it's really hard, guys, to film a deer hunt by yourself. And it's really hard for two people to film it in that canoe. You never have the camera running whenever you jump deer, it don't seem like. And I've noticed that whenever you do jump one and the camera's running, you can't really see it on there. If they're out past 50 or 100 yards, you really, because you don't have the zoom, and depending on what camera you're filming with, and I don't have a really good camera to film with, not one that I'm going to put in the canoe anyway. All right, now I'm getting down here to this. You see this meat hanging off the side? I'm going to cut that off. In fact, right here we're going to divide the whole thing. What I did, and the reason this is on there, is I cut down into the neck. That back strap goes all the way down into that neck, and I kept cutting it because I cut the front shoulders off first. But now we fixing to get started packaging this up, get it put up in the freezer. I'm going to turn this camera up for a minute. I tried not to make my video too long. It looks like it's pushing around 30 minutes. We may have to edit some of it out, but I'm having to do everything with my iPhone right now. But anyway, thank you guys for watching my videos. I just wanted to do a short processing on how I do it. Like I said, I'm not saying this is the best way to do it or a right or wrong way. This is like a lot of other things. Everybody that does it has a certain way they like to do things. But this video is for if you don't know how to do it and you start and get into deer hunting and you want to process your own meat, by all means you can do this. It's very simple. I skinned this deer, I cut him down, I quartered him up pretty much off the gambrel right here that's hanging up, and I've got this gambrel here, it slides. I realize you can't see. Let me turn that camera up just a little bit. I want to show you this gambrel. And I've got my sinew hanging on it, but it slides up. I really like this one because if I kill a pig, a small pig or anything, it'll close in and it'll adjust to whatever size deer you kill, and it'll hang the biggest deer. And I've got a boat winch over there. We just hand crank stuff up. I don't have the fancy electronic stuff. But anyway, if you're getting into this, you can process your own deer. I hung him up. I cut him off the bones, or the hindquarters I did. The one that you just seen me do is the one I did in the woods. It was still on the bone, but I only left the center bone in there. Put it in, quartered it up, front shoulders, tenderloins, everything, into the cooler. Put ice on it. It's been in that cooler for a week. You check it. As long as there's a little ice in that water, it's fine. You can drain the blood off. You lose a little of the gamey taste. Some people like that. Some people don't like the gamey taste. I like it myself. But I've not had time to really put this deer up. So it's been there. This is Saturday. This deer was killed last Saturday. He's been in there a week. Meat is still fine. It's still got a lot of dark color in it. A lot of people say, oh, it turned solid white. It don't need to soak that long. I don't put salt in it. I know a lot of people, they want to put salt in there. I don't want salt on my deer meat. I put it in there, and I really don't like it soaking in the water too much. The ice melts, and it gets in there, yes. The best thing is if you got a meat cooler and you can hang it up and it can stay below 40 degrees in the upper 30s for a week and let him hang, that's perfect. But if it warms up in Mississippi, the flies get to it, I'm done with it. So I put it in the cooler. That's why we're way down south. If you're further up north and you've got cold enough temperatures, let that meat hang. Just cut him and hang him and let him hang and age a little bit. It's good that way. But thank y'all for watching. We fixing to vacuum seal this, put it in the freezer. If you don't have a vacuum sealer, fill your sink up water, fill a 5-gallon bucket up with water, take that Ziploc bag, put your meat in it, set it down in there. Don't let the water get inside on the meat, but down, and it'll push all the air out, and you can zip it shut. Works just as good. Thank y'all for watching. Y'all have a good one. Remember, the best way to do things, the way you like to do it. Y'all have a good one. We'll see y'all next time.